Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I'm your host, Wendy McCallum. I am really excited about today's podcast guest. I'm going to tell you about her in a moment. A couple things before I do that. First of all, if any of you are struggling right now to drink less, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of the fact that I have a really great 3-video series that is free and available to anyone. All you need to do is go to my website at wendymccallum.com/myths. That's MYTHS. Again, so Wendy McCallum, that's WendyMccallum.com/myths. It's a 3-video free series that I created to basically get at the 3 most common reasons why we think we need to drink, including alcohol helps me to cope, I need alcohol to have fun, and alcohol helps me to relax. So that video series is available for anyone. Just go to that URL and they will get delivered. Those videos will get delivered to your inbox, and I would love to hear what you think about them. I know that for me, those were the 3 main reasons why I had such a hard time changing my relationship with alcohol. So I wanted to offer those up to you today. Today's podcast episode will be dealing with the topics of alcohol and addiction and childhood trauma. So I also just want to let people know that in advance, in the event that those are triggering topics for you, or you have kids nearby and you're about to listen to this podcast. Govern yourselves accordingly. It is going to be a fantastic discussion. I am recording this intro in advance of actually recording the podcast, and I don't always do that. Often I do them afterwards, but the reason I'm doing it today is because I know how good this conversation is going to be, and even though my guest Jessica and I have never actually had a face-to-face conversation, I just have this feeling that we have a lot to talk about, and it's going to be a really interesting discussion. So let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Really special one today, guys. So Jessica Landon is based in Los Angeles, and she is a comedic actress. She has guest starred in a whole bunch of really cool shows. So she's been on a lot of Comedy Central shows like Mad TV, Robot Chicken, the Jamie Foxx sketch comedy show, Nickelodeon's Drake and Josh, and also Lionsgate Drive-Thru, and NBC's Medical Investigations. So Jessica had kind of a storybook life for a period of time, or so it seemed on the outside. She posed for Playboy and Perfect 10 magazine. She partied with Hugh Hefner. She created what she thought was a glamorous life and had this really fantastic acting career going on. But it all came at a cost. When she was 26 years old, well into her acting career, she spiraled into a full-blown, non-functioning alcoholic, destroying all of her relationships and her career. After surviving many tussles with death, including a brain hemorrhage in 2013, she was finally able to overcome her addiction, fully embracing a life of forgiveness, gratitude, love, and sobriety. Turning her life around, Jessica made it her mission to end the stigma and shame that surround addiction and help those still struggling. And that is why she is on the podcast today, because this is my mission too. I want to open up the conversation around alcohol and addiction. And I want to normalize the conversation so that this is not something that we need to be ashamed about talking about. I've said it before on this podcast, 84% of North Americans drink, and about 70% of them wish they drank less. So most people who drink are not super happy with how much they're drinking. That's the truth of it. And we need to be talking about that more. So after recovering from addiction, Jessica opened up about her past on social media and quickly became known for her inspiring story of redemption. And it is so inspiring, you guys. She is an absolute delight. Her harrowing journey has since been published in news outlets across the globe. And most recently, she did an absolutely wonderful TEDx talk, which I encourage you all to go and listen to, called Laughing at Addiction. Jess is now a writer, host of Sober Mom Squad, certified heart math resilience recovery coach, public speaker, and a new mom. She lives with her fiance and her 17-month-old son and has recently finished writing her memoir, Human on Fire. I'm really excited for this conversation, and I hope that you guys enjoy it as much as I know I will. Hi, Jessica. I am so glad to have you here today.
I'm just so happy to be here. I just absolutely adore you. So I'm so honored you had me on.
Oh, I just posted actually on social media right before this, how amazing it is that this has become my life. I was just reflecting on it this afternoon as I was getting ready for this interview. When I look back on my life 12 years ago, I don't know how much you know about me, but I had a previous career before I was a coach. I practiced law for 12 years. I kind of hated it. It led to my own personal burnout and was a big piece of my drinking story. And it was a big decision to leave that. And I was thinking today, like how much stress I had when I left that job and how worried I was about whether I was ever going to be able to find something that actually was fulfilling for me. And I remember thinking like, maybe I just have these really high expectations for life. Maybe I should be happy with what I have because again, on paper, it was a pretty good life, but I just wasn't happy. And so this afternoon I was thinking, nope, good decision. This is a great life. I get to do this really fun job on Fridays, which is do these podcast interviews. And I'm really excited to talk to you today because you have such an interesting story, obviously, but on top of that, I just think you're such a delight. And I love talking to people who are just lovely people. So I'm really looking forward to this today.
Oh, thank you.
So I would love it, Jess, because a lot of people who are listening are not going to know that much about you. I did provide your biography, but I would love it if you would start by just kind of telling us the story of how you got to where you are today, which is active in the recovery community. So maybe just tell us how it all started and how you got to recovery and where you are now.
I started seeking medication for my hole in the soul, whatever you want to, my anxiety, my uncomfortable, the feeling of just not being able to sit in my skin. And I'm sure that stems from, childhood trauma, sexual abuse, whatever. Or I don't know, maybe it doesn't. Maybe I just was born that way. And I wanted something to make me a little more callous so I could live in the world and just be normal like everybody else. It was like this feeling of how is everyone just walking around normal, not feeling like they're going to just spontaneously combust. I had this anxiety, this like elephant on my chest. And as soon as I took a drink of vodka from my dad's liquor cabinet, like 12 years old, that was the answer. That was the answer to all my questions. That was like, oh, this is how people act normal. This is what it feels like to just be normal in the world. And so I started sneaking alcohol from that point on until I, moved down. I started drinking every day, and then it sort of progressed. And I was high functioning for many years. I was in that like sort of gray area drinking, quote unquote, for many years, but it progresses. Neurochemical shift will inevitably happen if you continue to drink the way I did. And, eventually, ultimately, it became a 24/7 job. It was like vodka all day. And as soon as I would hit withdrawals, then the shakes and the pounding heart, I had to have vodka next to my bed. If I, woke up from being passed out, pound it, go back to sleep. And it became hell. That's when it was like, it went from being able to manage it for years to unmanageability to complete dependence on it, physically, mentally, everything. So that's when it was like I couldn't live with it. I couldn't come off of it alone, but I couldn't keep going or I was going to die. I mean, I was vomiting blood. I was like 80 pounds because I just didn't have an appetite. It was hell. I got honest with my family, went to my first rehab in 2009, and over the course of the next 6 years, it also, mind you, just to give you a little paint a picture, I was also acting. So that the years that I was like managing it, I was booking jobs. And here's the other thing that made alcoholism so hard and inextricable to my life and to quit and to pull apart. It was because I thought it was helping me book jobs. I would go to auditions like buzzed, and just kill it. And then be like, oh, this is what I need to be acting. And I was on Drake and Josh, and I was on Medical Investigations on NBC. I was on Jamie Foxx Sketch Comedy Show. I was doing these shows drunk, essentially. And so once it became out of control and I knew I couldn't live with it, I thought, how am I ever going to do anything I've done all these years without alcohol? Because I had become so dependent in that way, work-wise as well. So it was really hard to have that shift in perception from, wait a minute, this is actually, destructive and hurting me. And I can actually separate myself from alcohol and perform and be better. And that's me. That's not the alcohol. To separate that was a big shift I needed to experience. But anyway, I went to my first rehab in 2009, and the next 6 years was just in and out. I kept relapsing. I was a chronic relapser, because I just felt like I was white knuckling it. I could not understand how people could just drop it and move on and live a sober life and find joy and freedom. That was really hard for me to conceive. I couldn't understand how people were doing that. And I would try, I was going to AA, doing lots of meetings, but I still felt like I was white knuckling it. I started drinking Listerine so that I could go to meetings, so not smelling like vodka. I mean, it was just insanity. For like a year, I was drinking Listerine. It was just making myself so sick, just so punitive. My drinking was always very punitive, which I think stems from a lot of shame and guilt from my childhood sexual abuse, that I was trying to kill. I remember one friend, he was watching me in a relapse, like drink, like pound vodka. And he was like, it's almost like you're trying to kill something in you. And I always thought that was sort of profound, because I felt like I was trying to kill the shame and the guilt that existed in me, in that visceral screaming demon right here, wouldn't quiet until I had vodka in my system. So it took a lot of therapy, trauma work. 9 rehabs later, psych wards. I had a brain hemorrhage in 2013, falling over a railing drunk. I was touch and go. They had to do emergency brain surgery because the hemorrhage almost herniated my brain, but not quite. I had grand mal seizures back to back, and then they went in and did the surgery, and miraculously I recovered. And I had a half of a shaved head from the surgery, was recovering in Napa for about a month and a half. And then I went back to LA, and this was my bottom. I did it all over again. And believe it or not, it was way worse. I was homeless, went to Linwood County Jail, which is like one of the worst jails in the country, very violent. For a month, I was there. I got lice and learned this in jail. Everyone wanted to kill me, literally, because, hygiene in jail is like, oh my, you're like disgusting scum of the earth and don't deserve to live if you have life. I got it from this woman's house I was staying at. Anyway, so had to deal with that in jail for a month, come out, was homeless. This man was buying me vodka, bottle after bottle. I basically laid there on this man's cave of hoarding, just drinking myself to death, urinating and defecating on myself. Ambulance were called, went into Brotman detox, and was barely hanging on. All my organs were failing. I had to have 2 immediate blood transfusions. I was 78 pounds. I was bleeding, hemorrhaging out of every orifice. There was blood coming out of my eyes, my nose. I mean, it was touch and go. And I remember coming to, so I was in ICU for about 16 days. And I remember coming to, overhearing my dad outside the hospital room say, well, it looks like she's going to make it, to my granddad over the phone. And I thought, oh my God, not again. What did I do? What happened? And I was too weak to leave AMA like I had every other time and go get vodka. I was, by the grace of God, too weak and to just get off that hospital bed. And I had to recover slowly. I had occupational therapy. I was so scared of myself that I didn't want to go to treatment, because I thought I don't trust myself. So I begged my parents to go back to Napa with them. That's where they were living. And I lived there for a year, and I went to several meetings a day. And gratitude was a huge, I listened to your episode on gratitude, and that was like a very big piece of my shift in perception, my first year of recovery. I talk a lot about that because, spending a month in jail and then being homeless and having lice and just living in your own feces, essentially, you will have circumstantial gratitude for months. That's like fresh coming out of that is like, oh, a cup of coffee, you're just a warm bed. You're so grateful for everything. But that's like, it's a different kind of gratitude. It's a circumstantial gratitude. Whereas gratitude that you want to last and really shift the brain, like you talk about neurochemically, have those neural pathways, the path of least resistance, looking for the good things in life. That takes practice, right? It's a daily thing. And so that I had to really start to intentionally practice gratitude, but that changed everything for me. And I had to really have a shift in perception from body identification to spirit identification, because my body was always my value in life. I always felt like this is all I have to offer the world. And I put myself in really bad positions. And I really thought that this is my value. And then I realized, wait a minute, what's of value is inside, and this just encased in decaying flesh that means nothing. And what I have to offer is in here, and took a lot of work, took a lot of therapy as well. But yeah, so that's where I kind of came into recovery. And it wasn't the mommy wine culture. I really wasn't exposed to mommy wine culture until recently during the pandemic, because, you know, my son is only 17 months. But that it was just learning how to be sober in a culture obsessed with alcohol. Generally, just a culture obsessed with alcohol. How do I do this?
Yeah. Oh my God, Jess, what a story. I don't even know where to start, except what I really want to understand is after your last, like the last rock bottom moment for you, and when you went to Napa to stay with your parents, do you remember what shifted? Like, do you remember when that shift happened? Where, because you were talking about how all the other times you were still white knuckling it. So it's still this deprivation based, you know, I can't have this thing. I'm getting ripped off. Everybody else can have this and I can't kind of mentality that we find ourselves in usually for a long time. So what caused that shift for you? Do you remember? Like, was it a moment, or was it the work in therapy? Was it a combination of all the stuff?
I really love this. This is $1 million question right here. What was the ultimate shift? Because everyone always asks that, because you relapsed 1 million times before. It's like, what's different this time? So many people ask that. And I remember finally the pain associated with alcohol eclipsed the pleasure associated with alcohol. My brain had a shift of, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so the pain just became greater than the pleasure. And there was like that, I have to find a way. It was almost like I went into survival mode, because I knew death was right there. And it was like, I either choose that, because I'm here, I can choose that, I can get off this bed and go and die, or I can just figure out a way, pave a path and figure out a way to do it. So there were times where I felt like I was white knuckling it, but still my brain remembered, oh, you're going to die. It's almost like my tolerance was very high to pain. So that's obviously why I had to have a bottom as low as I did. But once I got there, it clicked. It's like the switch went off and was like, oh my God, you know, the alcohol is causing all of this pain. I have to find a better way, a way to live. And it was probably 51-49, you know, that I wanted to drink versus wanted to live. I wanted to live like 51% more than I wanted to drink.
Yeah.
And I found a way, and that's when, as I found a way, is when the tools sort of fell into place. It's not as though like the tools saved me. It was almost like the shift happened first, and then the tools came in, and it was like, that's what kept me going. It was the only way I could sort of continue to stay on that sober path, was the gratitude, the therapy, the prayer. Every single morning I was on my knees. I was so desperate. I was so scared. You know, when death becomes that, when it's that close, you get really scared. I was just so frightened of myself. I was frightened of being alone. But that freshness of it being, that kept me sober long enough for my brain to heal, because it was fresh on my mind. And once my brain started to heal, it became easier to, you know, implement these new tools, connect with other people, listen, be of service. And that just kept me going.
I hear what you're saying when you say it's almost like you need to get your brain there before the tools are actually going to work for you.
Exactly.
And of course, I mean, you work in this world now. I work in this world as a alcohol-free life coach. You work in the same world as a recovery coach. And many of the women that I work with, and I know this is the case for you as well, don't ever have those rock bottom moments.
Right.
And I wonder so if someone's listening to this podcast right now, and I guarantee you there's someone, because we know what the statistics are, there's someone listening to this podcast right now who wants desperately to change their relationship with alcohol, but can't seem to make it happen. There's probably also someone who feels that way, who has not reached any kind of objective rock bottom. So they haven't had any kind of moments, obviously nothing like the story that you have. And they're struggling with that because they're thinking to themselves, well, I don't meet the definition of an alcoholic, or, you know, this doesn't objectively look like problematic behavior. you work with those women. I work with those women. What do you say to someone?
Well, it's so interesting that you're asking this, because someone just DM'd me this question. She said, I don't identify as an alcoholic. When I go to meetings, I don't feel like I fit there because I don't have nothing externally happened to me. There was no bottom. Like, do you have any advice for me? Like, I'm in a cycle where I know alcohol is damaging and I will end up with a DUI, and I feel like if I continue, I'm going to lose everything, and it's making me suffer and it's damaging my life, but I don't have there's no catalyst or reason to change. Do you have advice for someone like me that I'm not really there yet? And I said, the most important question, it doesn't matter what is happening externally in your life. It doesn't matter if there's circumstances, you're falling apart, you're losing your house. That doesn't matter. The most important question is, what do you feel on the inside? If you are suffering internally, that is your answer. You got to change. The change happens when the pain is greater than the pleasure. And if the pain is great inside and you have a toxic relationship with alcohol, the whole reason we share our stories, the whole reason I want people to see how low it goes, is because you don't have to go there.
Right. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. And I know Annie Grace talks about this all the time, this idea of like getting off the speeding train before it goes off the bridge.
Exactly.
The idea of like it. And I say this, I've said this many times, I think on this podcast, but I'll say it again. The only thing that matters to me when it comes to certainly when it comes to women reaching out for help from me, is that they have gotten to a point where alcohol is taking more than it's giving.
Exactly.
If you are at a point where you're thinking, is this a problem? It's probably a problem.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter objectively how bad it looks, and whether you have had, and I've said this before on this podcast, I was very, very lucky. I didn't have any objectively horrible rock bottom moments, any really significant consequences to my drinking. But would I have gotten there if I'd kept drinking? Of course, because it's a spectrum, because we build a tolerance, because it's a powerful drug, and because that's where everybody gets to. And so I'm glad you said that, because I know that for many people, the identifying as an alcoholic really serves them. It's a very helpful thing. But there are also lots of women out there, and this is really the demographic that I tend to work with, women who don't identify with that label and who therefore don't feel comfortable going to like an AA meeting or many of these group programs that are out there. So yeah, I think the real test is, how's it making you feel?
Exactly. I just think it's amazing. And I always say this in my meetings, like, I just marvel at how many women are catching it before it gets there. Like, this is incredible. You are an amazing, strong warrior. If you are starting to see a pattern before it gets there, and you're like, you know what, this is not serving me, I need to do something about it, and you take an action, that's huge. That's unbelievable. And I love to talk about my gray area drinking phase, because I want women to know, hey, look what happened when I kept going.
Yeah.
And I was in that position. So it is a progressive thing. Your brain is malleable. That's the thing, is it's adaptive. And so it adapts to the consumption of alcohol in a way that it thinks that it's going to survive better that way. But it's really just completely shifting the brain neurochemically and rewiring it. And then that's why it fits the disease model, because it's a malfunction.
Yeah, of course. And no one starts off drinking thinking, oh, well, I hope that I become an alcoholic and I'm living on the streets someday. Everyone starts off as a gray area drinker. And it's really important to remember that. And I think it's really fantastic that we have this sober curious movement happening now, and people are starting to talk about this. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I know how important it is to you, as it is to me, to start having an open, honest conversation without any stigma or shame around drinking and over drinking, and women's over drinking in particular, because, as you, I know, are well aware, this has become an even bigger problem in the last year during this pandemic. And we're in a pandemic within a pandemic of problematic drinking for women. And it's not our fault. It's because this is, an incredibly stressful and difficult time for women. Women are bearing the lion's share of the work in terms of the emotional labor, on top of all the physical labor and, their careers. And
then we're marketed to as this being the solution. Alcohol is the solution to all your problems. Oh, you're not coping? Drink alcohol. All these wine memes are the big alcohol, and the way they market to moms is just it is a cultural malignancy. When you see the memes that are just that go viral, you just think, wow, this is like a collective, like, virus going through our subconscious collectively. Is like, it's a malignancy. It's really sad.
Yeah. And 100% normalizing the use of alcohol is a way to cope. And of course, I'm a burnout coach. That's what I do. I work with, professional women who are struggling with burnout, and most of them are using alcohol as one of their coping mechanisms, or maybe their primary coping mechanism. And, this message that we're getting, that it's absolutely acceptable and normal. And not only is it acceptable and normal, but we actually need this. So
Right.
we actually can't do this without it. So we're actually, subpar. We don't have the capacity to actually parent without alcohol, to do our jobs without alcohol, to manage the things that we're managing, to process emotions without alcohol. We can't do any of that without alcohol. So yeah, it's a really big problem. And I know that you're the mom of, how old's your little guy now?
17 months.
17 months. So you've got a little person in your house. My people are now 16 and 17. And I was saying to you before we pressed record on this podcast, I'm not really in mummy wine culture anymore, but I see it, it's all around me. I still see all the memes on social media. But what I have realized in the last couple of years is that my kids are on social media now. So my kids are seeing it all.
It's unbelievable.
So what kind of a message is it sending to my 16 and 17-year-olds that you can't homeschool a kid without alcohol, or we drink wine because you cry. It's just terrible, really. Anyway, I keep having this discussion on here. Everybody who comes on who I think might have something to say about this, I'm like, let's talk about this again, because I think it's something we just need to keep talking about, because it's not changing. And I think it's gotten way worse during the pandemic. And it's, as you said, it's one of the factors. So yes, anxiety and stress are at an all-time high. Women's burnout's at an all-time high. The marketing geared towards women around alcohol is at an all-time high. We're at this place where it's coming at us from all angles. So what Jess and I want to tell you guys is, it's okay to not drink.
Yeah.
It's okay to decide to drink less, even if society doesn't think you have a problem, your BFF doesn't think you have a problem, your spouse doesn't think you have a problem. If it doesn't feel right to you anymore, it's totally okay to not drink. I would love for this to just be like a positive wellness choice. I would love for us to be able to just like talk about it in conversation. Like, okay, I don't eat sugar, or gluten was bugging me, so I stopped eating that.
Well, that's what I love about the Sober Curious movement, is that it's a wellness choice. It's like, oh, it's not really serving me. I want a better, more joyous, beautiful, full, free life. And alcohol is, it's not helping me get that. So I'm going to choose to live. I just think that is amazing.
Yeah.
Because I guess I just feel like I was so entrapped in the claws of alcohol, that having that choice is such a beautiful, wow. I think it's really amazing. So many people are waking up to that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's great. I just want to keep the discussion going. I have this secret fear that it's going to just die away and go away if I don't keep talking. If we all just need to keep talking about it, because, the question that I think we really need to be asking ourselves, instead of, is this bad enough to quit, is this good enough to keep going? Like,
exactly. That's it.
Right? And what would be possible for me without this in my life? What might I be able to do with my career if I wasn't drinking most nights? What would I be able to do as a parent, and with my personal relationships if alcohol wasn't such a big factor? If alcohol wasn't running the show, what kind of show could I create for myself? Like, what kind of life could I have? And just spend a little time thinking about that. And if the answer is, well, maybe it would be better, then experiment with this.
Right.
And here's the other thing I want to say. Just because you're not an alcoholic, or you don't objectively have a problem with this, does not mean it's going to be easy to change your relationship with alcohol, right?
Oh.
Like, it can still be hard, and you're not an alcoholic. So it can still be hard, and you can, and what the reason I say that is, reach out for support. That's what, there's so many programs out there now. You guys are we're going to talk about Sober Mom Squad, but we'll talk about that at the end of the podcast. But you and Emily Lynn Paulson, who's been on this podcast as well, and a number of other really amazing women leaders in this area have put together this program. And you guys have a community of women who are trying to change their relationship with alcohol. And my guess is 50% of them don't identify as alcoholics, but recognizing, like, this is just becoming not great for me. It's not serving me anymore. Starting
Right.
to recognize that.
And realizing that, habits are very powerful. Set the neurobiology aside of addiction, the process, if you may not be there, but a habit, you still have a habit, and a habit is really hard to break. Say you have a habit of like going out and getting drunk on Friday, or you just cook with wine. You may not identify as an alcoholic, but that habit is really hard to break. So that's what I love about Sober Mom Squad, and I know we'll get into it more, but it's very inclusive, and that's the maybe limiting, I'll say, thing about AA. It's a little more exclusive. This is extremely inclusive. If you're experimenting, if you are exploring, if you are just interested in hearing what we have to say, it's all of the above. You're welcome here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. And, the other place to go and do that, which I've talked about on here, I've had Annie Grace on this podcast as well, is the alcohol experiment, which is, I don't know if have you read This Naked Mind?
No, I really want to though.
Oh, you'd love it. But that is another place to go if you're sober curious. And the alcohol experiment is really geared towards just giving people the opportunity to experience what it's like to have a month without alcohol. And when you approach it, I think with that mindset, going back to what you were talking about before with this whole, like, how hard it was for you to see that life actually might be better without alcohol, and you lived in that place of deprivation for so long. I think one of the big keys to moving away from that deprivation mindset is to stay curious about it and go into it with this, like, I actually don't know what life is going to be like without alcohol, because it's been in my life. For most of us, it's been in our lives since we were 16, 15, 14, 12, depending on the person, like since we were kids, this has been part of our lives. So most of the women that I work with have never taken a real break from alcohol, and they really don't have any idea what life is like without it. They are assuming it's going to be horrible. Mm-hmm. They are assuming it's going to be really hard. They're going to miss it. They're going to, have, all of those, they're going to have to deal with all of those tough cravings and urges and all of that. And yeah, you will, by the way, have to deal with cravings and urges. But if you go into it assuming it's going to be terrible, it's probably going to be terrible. If you go into it with a curious, open mind, saying like, I don't really know what this is going to be like, but I am going to give it 30 days and see, because this is the only way I'm going to find out. I think you're far more likely to see those little unexpected joy moments that happen in an alcohol-free life. I've seen that work with so many women, and it's so hard when you're in that deprivation mindset, because you're relying entirely on willpower. That's it. Right.
That was my white knuckling it. And when I had that switch went off of like, oh, it's not a choice anymore, there was such a freedom. It was so liberating, because I knew like, okay, well, I'm excited to find out like what way is going to help me live, because I know I can't go there. There was a decision I made internally. I conceded to my innermost self, like they say in AA, that I will die if I do that. So that was so freeing. It was like, all right, bring it on. What can I do? A Course in Miracles, pray every day. I was just open. When you're open, you find all these new ways of freedom and joy, and laughter was huge. Finally getting to that point of like belly laughing again. I hadn't genuinely laughed in years. It had been since I was like little that I had laughed, from just drinking and numbing out, and not just laughter had been missing from my life for so many years. So when I found it again, it was a really big deal. It was monumental. It was like, oh my gosh, humor. What have I been missing? And then using that to heal and finding humor in all the things. Finding humor in my past was very freeing. It was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What a mess, and my family and I just laughing about all these horrific things. We found so much healing in it that's when I really discovered the importance of laughter, and then when I discovered what it was doing neurochemically and neurobiologically to the brain, it was like, wow, laughter is so important. It is so important.
Yeah. Can you speak more on that? Because Jessica's TED Talk, you guys, is on this topic, and it's so interesting. If you guys listen to this podcast because you like the fact that most of what I talk about is backed in some kind of science, because I'm a big believer in, providing some fact and fact to back up, all of these recommendations and suggestions that I have for living your best life. So if that's your thing, you're going to really love this TED Talk, because she talks about the neurochemical activity that happens in our brains when we laugh. And so I would love it if you would just take a minute and explain some of the things that are happening with laughter and how that connects to better wellness and just overall happiness. Like true.
Right. The whole, emotional healing that happens, as well as the physical, the impact on physical health is also like, it's just shocking. It lowers, the stress hormones, cortisol. I mean, the studies they've done on laughter, and when you have they've done like test studies where 20 people laugh at a video for 20 minutes and then other people just sit there and don't laugh, and they measure the saliva levels of the stress hormone cortisol, and it's significantly lower just by laughing at something, just by watching something funny for 20 minutes. But I mean, what it does emotionally, and the neurochemicals and the neurotransmitters that are released, it is so powerful. The endorphins, the endogenous opiate, which modulates pain, which is, a form of our natural opiate. These things are released when we laugh, and it's extremely healing. And collectively, what it does as well is it promotes connection. I mean, there's a sense of togetherness and connection that happens when you laugh. And it's just everything it does neurochemically is like, wow. There is a reason it's called, medicine. It literally is medicine to the body, to the brain. I think when it first hit me that, oh wow, I have to use humor in my healing, or else, I think that's why in recovery meetings, people are laughing. I mean, they're so funny when they tell their stories, because literally we would probably shoot ourselves thinking about where we've been in our past.
Yeah.
But collectively, when you go and people are telling their stories and people are cracking up, and it's like, well, that was really a eye-opening thing for me. It was like, oh wow, people are coming together and laughing about this, and how healing it is to laugh about our past.
Yeah. 100%. I noticed the same thing. I run a small group for women around alcohol, and the power of the community is incredible. So the power of shared story is incredible, but humor comes in all the time. We can go from someone crying to someone laughing in the span of like 5 seconds. And just to pause on this for 1 sec, because one of the things I've been talking about a lot in this podcast, Jess, is is closing the stress cycle, because I'm a burnout coach, and it's an important piece of managing and preventing burnout, is making sure that you're pulling yourself out of fight or flight, out of that, elevated state of adrenaline and cortisol, and into where we're naturally supposed to be most of the time, which is called the relaxation response. And we know that there are certain activities that we can do that help us to actually close that stress cycle. And all of those activities have one thing in common, and that is that they send a clear signal to our brain that we are out of danger and no longer running away from the saber-toothed tiger. And so that laughter example that you gave is a perfect example of a way to close the stress cycle. And it's for exactly the same reason, because there's no way when you are still being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you're going to have time to laugh your ass off with your people, right? So yeah, so that's what's happening there. And, as you said, there are so many great neurochemicals that are released during that process that just help us to feel good. But one of the things that it does is it brings your cortisol levels down. And so that laughter, it's great. It's great to know that laughter can be with people that you love. That true, like belly laughter with people you love. But it sounds like from that piece of research you were talking about, you can be laughing at something else. Like, right. I've been watching Superstore. Have you ever watched that show? Do you know what I'm talking? Oh my God. It's on Netflix. So I think it's an old show, but there are like 5 seasons, and it's America Ferrera as the star, like the main female lead in this thing. Anyway, it makes me laugh. And I watch, like, the episodes are 20 minutes long, and I can watch like 4 of them in a row, and nobody needs to be around, and I'm just laughing my ass off.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. It's, if you can find a show or a podcast or something that makes you laugh, especially right now during these times where we're also isolated and it is hard to find community and connection, there's value in that.
I think it's so fascinating and incredible that we are biologically hardwired to laugh. I mean, I remember looking at Callum when he was a newborn, before he was even cognizantly aware of anything. He would have these little bouts of laughter. I mean, at like 8 weeks, like laughing. He's not laughing. His eyes aren't even open.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, wow, it is advantageous to our survival as human beings, to our species, to laugh, to, like you said, running from that saber-toothed tiger, like we wouldn't have time to laugh. It sucks you right out of a stressful situation and into a calm, because it is advantageous to our survival to laugh, to be able to sit and laugh at something.
Yeah, 100%. So that's great. I think, I really wanted to make sure we talked about that today, because that's one of the pieces that I think is critical, just generally to people's health and wellness and happiness. But I think especially in recovery, or when it comes to just changing your coping mechanisms. So moving away from unhealthy coping mechanisms, all of these tools are really, really helpful. And I think it's always motivating to understand why they work from a physiological perspective. So that's fantastic. I also want to talk to you a little bit. I have lots of clients who struggle with, as you have said in other places, I don't know if you've said it yet today, but the statistically, women with addiction also have a very high likelihood of having had trauma in their past.
Yes.
And there's quite a correlation there between trauma and of course, trauma is a really broad word too. So trauma encompasses all kinds of things. I have yet to meet anyone in my coaching practice who has not gone through some trauma. And I'm always trying to encourage people, women especially, to share, and this comes from the whole Brene Brown idea that shame and really only exists under a rock, and as soon as we lift the rock and expose it to the light of day, it starts to shrivel up and die. And I'm such a big proponent of sharing in a safe way, obviously. So sharing with people who feel safe and talking about these things. Can you talk about the role that talking, for lack of a better word, talking about some of those traumas for you had in your recovery?
Oh my God. That was so, that's where I found peace and freedom and healing, was talking about it openly with another human being or a group or whatever, somebody that actually heard me say the words, what happened to me, that just being able to take it out of regurgitate it out of my body was so healing.
Yeah. There's something about just like laying it down and talking about it. Yeah, I know. And
the world and going, look, it diffuses its toxicity. It diffuses the power it had over you. It can have the power to completely heal you in one big swoop.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I just, I also, as I said, it has to be, you have to feel safe wherever it is that you do that. But and Annie Grace has this great saying. Well, it's not hers, I don't think, but I love it. I don't know where it came from originally. If it's yours, I apologize, whoever's listening. But she says we want to be careful to be sharing from our scars and not from our wounds. So when things are still like gaping open wounds, that's when I think it's important to talk about them. I'm not saying it's not, but that's when you really need to make sure you're in a safe place for that. But as time progresses and you start to recover, and you're in the place where you are now or where I am now, I feel like it's almost my duty to talk about these things, because I want other women to know that there are millions of other women out there struggling with the same thing, feeling the same thing, who have gone through the same experiences as they have, and that there is nothing to be ashamed of.
Exactly. And the power in giving, when you talk about your own trauma, you are giving permission to other women to talk about theirs. And there is such a healing, because I remember in one of probably a few of the Sober Mom Squad meetings, I have talked about my past trauma, and it opened up a can of, everyone was talking about and there was something so magical and divine and beautiful and healing about that meeting, because almost everybody shared about, whether it was a little T or a big T, a trauma in their past, that it was incredible. Just feeling heard and everybody opening up about that was really powerful.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me into the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is the really like the inherent, I think it must be a biological need for human connection that we all have. I think maybe, well, I don't want to say especially women, but I know for sure, because I am a woman and I work with women, that this is a real need for women. So, you want to speak on that a little bit, because you guys have created this really incredible community with Sober Mom Squad. So when we're talking about SMS, we're talking about Sober Mom Squad, which is, why don't you just talk about it now? Why don't you tell people what it is, Jessica? Because we keep talking about it.
Sober Mom Squad is a community of women exploring alcohol-free life. It's very inclusive. started it during the pandemic when things got really crazy with the mommy wine culture. And we're like, how can we rebuttal this? What can we create that would be a safe space for women to come that don't want to drink, that don't want to go down this rabbit hole?
Mm-hmm.
And so we started these meetings. We have a free meeting on Wednesday at 1:00 p.m. Pacific time. And it is just incredible. It has been, we also have a Sober Mom School that is expert webinars, which we had you on my favorite webinar, oh my God, on burnout. And we offer through like multiple meetings a day, like 3 to 5 meetings a day throughout the week. And it's just a safe place for women to come. And the community is so powerful. I mean, we lean on each other. We have this Big Sis program right now where if you are newer in recovery, someone that's further along can sort of guide you. And that's been a huge success. So it's just been really, really wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to break down, I'll be honest about this too. So don't feel like you're being exposed with this question I'm asking you. I'm going to answer it too. I'll answer it first. If I was to break down, so the women that I work with in all the areas that I work, so around burnout, which is really, always involves unhealthy coping mechanisms, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol, whether it's social media, something else. So the work that I do around burnout or alcohol specifically, I would say that when I'm ever able to create that community and connection for women, that at least 50% of the value of the coaching I do comes from the connection with other women, not from me. It's
Yeah.
not coming from me. And in some cases, I would say it's probably more than that, which is one of the reasons why I try to incorporate community in almost all of the coaching and programming that I offer, at least as an option for women. And even my private clients can go into what I call my alumni group afterwards, which allows them to create those relationships outside of their one-on-one relationship with me. Have you found kind of the same thing with the Sober Mom Squad?
Absolutely. And I think that's why, AA is so successful and helps millions of people. The fellowship key is so huge. And it's the same with this community. It's the fellowship, it's the finding, that it's the bonding, it's the opening up and seeing other people and women and hearing their stories. And that neurobiological, like the benefits of that is profoundly important in recovery, is having that. And sometimes that's all.
Yeah.
Sometimes some people, that's all they need is to just go to these meetings every day and boom, that's their solution.
It's true. Like sometimes you just need to know that you're not the only one.
Exactly.
And no matter what your thing is, you are never the only one. But unfortunately, what I find happens, and this is something I work with my private clients. A lot of the times when they first come to see me, for reasons I totally understand, they're very concerned about confidentiality and discretion, because a lot of the women that I work with are in kind of high profile executive roles, and they don't want other people to know what's going on with them, which I get. But I always find myself in the course of coaching them on creating connection, coaching them to reach out, coaching them to like dip their toe in the water. So one of the things I've said before around, creating more direct connections with women. One of the ideas I have, if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking like, I'm not connected, first of all, go and check out SMS, see whether that's for you. Sober Mom Squad, there's a wonderful community there. If you're looking for, more one-on-one support, obviously that's what I do. But if you're going to, like, there are so many meetings out there now. So, Laura McCowan's got her great Luckiest Club going on, TLC, which is really great meetings. They're pretty big though. So what I've been saying to women is reach out in that chat and just say, hey, is there anyone in X area? Is there anyone living in Pennsylvania who, is around this age, who would like to connect privately? Or if you're listening to somebody's story that day and it really resonates with you and you feel like you have, some commonalities with them, or maybe your kindred spirits, like send them a private message and just say, hey, I loved your story. Is there any chance you would want to chat offline with me?
Yeah, seeing that in Sober Mom Squad in the chat, like, oh, so-and-so, because they can share their personal information in the forum. So if they connect to their stories, like, oh, you're in Boston too, like, let's connect. I put my number in the chat, like seeing all of these connections being made, because women all over they're bound to be another woman nearby. And so they're making all these friendships, and that's so important.
Yeah, it is. It's so important. I just want to emphasize that today on this podcast. Don't resist reaching out for help. And if you're not at a place where you want to reach out in a group forum, I totally get that. Reach out to me privately and I will help you connect with other people. I can help you find the right group for you, the right community for you. But if you're sitting at home right now and you're thinking, I can't do that, I can't take that first step, you can go to these meetings and you can change your Zoom name to somebody else. You can change your little Zoom nickname so that it doesn't have anything to do with you. And you can keep your screen off so that nobody can see your face. You can go to these meetings and at least hear the shared story. There's power in that as a starting place. Okay, what else do I want to talk to you about? Okay, I want to know, so you talked about the role that gratitude played in terms of that circumstantial gratitude, just like being safe after you were able to physically start to recover. But then you were kind of distinguishing that from the practice of gratitude. So what has the practice of gratitude changed for you?
I think it started out as big things and then they got more detailed. And I think that has helped. I love just the specific things that, may not be huge but it really does make a difference. You start just noticing everything in your day that is a positive and the cup just gets fuller and fuller and fuller. Then suddenly that's really all you see is, well, this happened, but look, we have A, B, C, D, and E. And oh my God, and also I think that has just kept joy in my life because gratitude really, it can change the game. It can change the quality of your recovery because
it's like the key to joy, isn't it? I mean, I really feel like it's the key to joy because all of these little things that are all around us that, first of all, we can't see them when we're drinking because drinking takes us out of life. So we can't see them. And then when we do stop drinking, we still can't see them because, as probably everybody's heard me say this before, we can't selectively numb. So in the process of using some unhealthy coping mechanism for years, not only have we numbed all the tough stuff, we've also numbed all the good stuff. So we're kind of starting at a deficit, when we first become alcohol free. And I think gratitude is the key to actually starting to see the good stuff that's happening, like actually start to notice those joyous moments. And I love what you just said, that idea of like being able to, even on a day when things are objectively kind of shitty, just your brain is automatically going to go to, oh, but this and this and this and this. I mean, I went for a walk today before this podcast, which you can see, Jess, but probably no one else is watching. But for the people watching it, see how my cheeks are red? It's because I went out with no sunscreen and I was like, I don't care. And it's finally sunny here. I do not live in California. I live in a cold Canadian climate. And so it's finally nice here today. And I went out and I was just like, walking with my face to the sun, knowing I was probably going to get burnt, but just so grateful for the fact that I get to walk in the sunshine today. And I just love the power of gratitude when it comes to shifting. I always say it's like you go from glass half empty to glass half full with gratitude. And your days are pretty much always glass half full, even when tough stuff happens during that day.
I love when you talked about your dad, and being able to have it during that time of grief, being able to focus on the little things that you were so grateful for. Just, that was a really powerful part of that.
Yeah. But I think too, when I think about your story and I think about gratitude and recovery, like it must have been equally powerful to you in that time when a lot of stuff probably still felt super shitty.
Yes. And I had really bad neuropathy for many, thank God it went away. But from my knees down, it was very painful. And I remember staying upstairs at my parents' house and going downstairs every morning and up, like really hurt. My ankles were really swollen and I was really just messed up physically. But every day I would just focus on, oh my God, I can still walk. I'm able to, I'll get my feeling back. The doctor said eventually it'll get better. I've just focused on every little thing that was like getting better. And it was just a game changer because I probably wouldn't have stayed. So it was pretty hard in the beginning. So it was a game changer.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably it's my number one tool. That and basic breathing exercises, because both of those things take like 2 minutes and everybody can do them. There's no excuse to not do either of those. So that brings me to my next question, which is self-care for for busy women. And, I think probably most of the women who listen to this podcast are also moms, not all of them. But one of the things that I talk about a lot on this podcast, again, because I work with women in burnout, is how do we take care of ourselves and how do we make sure that we don't let ourselves get depleted? And so many women are completely depleted right now as a result of everything going on. And yeah, me too. Hello. But I think what we've been talking about today, without specifically naming it as such, is simple, small ways to actually give yourself some really meaningful self-care, like laughing, watching an episode of this Superstore, which I mean, I can't say enough about it. It's the funniest show. It's just so dumb. It's funny, but finding something that makes you laugh that way, that's self-care. Like self-care is not about getting a pedicure or, I mean, it can be, but it's not about bubble baths and pedicures. Self-care is about asking yourself, what is it that I really need in this moment? Like, what is missing for me? And sometimes women struggle with figuring that out. And I say, okay, think back to a time when you didn't feel this depleted. What was there? What was happening for you regularly, right? That's not there now. And then try to get more of that in your life. And right now, for a lot of us, it is laughter, because it's really tough, right? So laughter is one element of easy self-care. We've talked about gratitude. Do you have any other kind of tools that you love for?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of just connecting to source, whatever that may be. For me, it's prayer. And oftentimes I don't even have 5 minutes by myself. I'm constantly with my son. He sleeps with me. He's in the crook of my arm. I wake up with him. But if I'm breastfeeding, if I have a moment of just silence, solitude, he's doing something, I will literally right then and there just start praying out loud. And for me, that creates a shift. I start noticing little miracles in the day. I start seeing signals, signs, confirmation, guidance. For me, it really, really, really is necessary. I have to pray.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah. And I mean, listen, you guys, if you're listening, self-care, it does not have to be fancy. It can be so damn simple. And sometimes what you need is to eat a hot meal at the table. Right. Instead of in the car between, gymnastics and the soccer practice. Sometimes that's what you need. And it's, as I said, it's very often not those typical things that we associate with self-care. It's about, asking yourself, what are the things that make me feel good, that when they're in my life runs way smoother and I just generally feel better. And then trying to make sure that you're incorporating those more often. Okay. Last thing I want to ask you about is this memoir, which makes me super excited because I love a good memoir and your story is incredible. So tell me about that. When did you decide to start writing a memoir?
Do you know, I started writing this memoir, I think it was 2016. Okay. Took me about a good solid year, maybe year and a half to really perfect. Then I started just getting my toes in the water with querying agents. And then 2018, my life turned upside down, met, the love of my life. And I don't believe in the one, I'm just saying the love of my life. But I met this person that completely changed my life, had a child. Now I'm engaged, and all these things happened in the course of 2 years. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop querying agents, and I'm going to sort of redo the ending because this changed drastically.
Right.
So I'm sort of perfecting that in the process, but it's virtually done. It's just sort of perfecting the end, and then I'll be back to square one, querying agents and everything. But it's
that is exciting. I know. That's exciting.
Now I know why Glennon Doyle wrote 3 memoirs. Because
because when do you know when it's over?
Exactly.
How do you stop?
And you're evolving every day. So a lot of things I've written in certain areas or phases, I'm like, that's actually not how I feel today. And I'm going to, you know what I mean? So it's hard to say okay, here, I'm going to package it.
Yeah. But I love that. I know you love Glenn. I love Glennon. Glennon, I love you so much. It was my ultimate dream to ever speak to Glennon Doyle. But when I read hers, I always think like, this is just 100% truth of where she was at this time in her life. This is how she felt about everything. And so I love the fact that she had the guts to just keep writing them and say like, okay, now it's totally different. Now I feel very different about this thing, or these things have changed. Anyway,
yeah,
it's really cool. I'm so excited to read this. I can't wait till it comes out. I'm going to 100% be riding your butt to get back on this podcast when that thing comes out. Will you come back and talk to me about it?
Absolutely.
Hopefully by then this podcast will be a big deal, Jessica.
It will. I absolutely love this podcast. And the name is perfect for it. Bite-sized balance. I love it. It's not too much. It's like the perfect amount of elevation, stimulation. No, your podcast is bomb. I love
it. Oh, thank you. Okay. Last, before we finish up. So if people are interested in Sober Mom Squad and exploring that, what's the website for that where they can go get some info?
SoberMomSquad.com.
Okay.
It's also, the link is also in my bio, or any of our bios. I'm Jessica Landon 12 on Instagram. Sign up at SoberMomSquad.com or check out the community. It's no pressure. There's a free Wednesday meeting at 1 p.m. PST. Lots of women come to that and turn their camera off and just listen in. So join us.
And it's a great option. If you're coaching with me right now privately, it's a great add-on. Like, it's just a great add-on. It's inexpensive. I love that about it. It's really accessible for women, and it's a really great community. It provides that community aspect that might be missing for you. So go and check that out, and follow Jessica on Instagram. She's hilarious. Her little videos. I didn't even get a chance to get you to do anything funny today. We kept it so serious today.
We kept talking about neurobiology. I mean, come on, it was just
anyway, yeah, you will love Jessica's posts. Thank you so much, Jess, for sharing so honestly with us today and for agreeing to be on this podcast. I knew it was going to be a delight, so much so that I recorded the intro to this podcast before we talked, because I knew it was going to be a great conversation, and it has been, and I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, have a great weekend.
You too.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.